Hi guys, welcome back to the Spurred On podcast and the match review of the Manchester City 3, Tottenham Hotspur 3 slugfest at the Etihad Stadium this afternoon. The game just went back and forth. It was basketball. I was sure, and I was telling everyone on text while I was watching, that Tottenham would end up losing 6-2. But it never happened, and there are reasons for that I will go into. But as ever, thank you so much for your support of the Spurred On podcast. If you are listening on your favourite podcast platform, please come over to YouTube, to youtube.com/@BarnabySlater_ and give us a subscribe there, and vice versa. If you're watching on YouTube, thank you so much for watching. Please do find us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, the Spurred On podcast, and give us a follow or subscribe there. So let's get into the game, guys. First up, the team selection. I wasn't overly surprised, I have to say. I felt like once he had started with Royale and Davis in the last game against Villa, that was kind of the death knell when it came to Eric Dyer for these kind of games. And that is exactly what happened. Maybe a lot of people would have thought Bryan Gil might have dropped out for this one, but I think he wanted to retain his attacking intent, and so he kept it in. And I'll talk a bit more about Bryan going forward. But in general, it wasn't any kind of huge surprise that he went with that team. Mentioning Bryan Gil, I said I would. I'll just go into it now. It's quicker that way. Obviously, he's getting pelters on social media after his performance in the first half. I personally didn't think he was that bad. He looks good on the ball when he's got space. Let's not forget, he set up that first goal by being brave outside his own box and getting the ball on the turn and then finding the player to put through Son. I think it was Deki Kulusevski, correct me if I'm wrong. But he does always get muscled off the ball, and there was definitely one occasion, and I'd heard someone on one of the other podcasts I love, possibly the Extra Inch, earlier this week, saying that a lot of players just get away with fouling Bryan Gil because he's so small, and it happened again in the first half, and we did turn the ball over a few times because of that. So it didn't surprise me at all when he was taken off and replaced by Pierre-Emile Højbjerg in the second half, and I think that did really benefit us massively. Let's talk about that Son goal going forward in the first kind of 5-6 minutes. What a surprise. Tottenham go 1-0 ahead at the Etihad. We always seem to go ahead at the Etihad against Manchester City. And it happens so often, and we've been going ahead in games so often this season that, yeah, of course, I celebrated it. I loved it. I was in a pub watching it, and I was actually sat next to a Man City fan, and I celebrated it, but neither of us were worried. In my case, I wasn't worried that we were going to win the game, if that makes sense. In fact, I just thought it might kind of awaken the beast, if you like. And that kind of happened, obviously, with Son then conceding the own goal very quickly afterwards. I mentioned it this week in the podcast this week. We are terrible at defending set pieces, particularly free kicks, attacking free kicks. I was completely surprised to see the stat on Sky Sports that Tottenham hadn't conceded from a corner yet this season, because every single corner and free kick we get, I have my fist in my mouth and my heart in my mouth. But because we're not playing any centre halves, I know a lot of you hate Eric Dyer, but you cannot doubt that he would have been better in terms of defending set pieces and getting his head on the first ball. And like I said in the podcast earlier this week, we miss Harry Kane in those defensive positions as well. He was such a good defensive header of the ball. And with Emerson Royale and Ben Davis as the two centre halves, we're just not getting the first head on that ball enough. There are a couple of times where Emerson Royale did it in the second half, I noticed, and that was good from corners especially. But that's where we're lacking a little bit. And to concede to a set piece to Man City is a bit disappointing because they've got so many threats that you don't want to really give them any more opportunity to score than they already do. Anyway, just to talk about Sonny's finish and run, great stuff. I think the goalkeeper really will be a bit unhappy with himself there, Ederson. But just goes to show, we have a great goalkeeper in Vicario who made a vital save at the beginning of that second half, and Ederson didn't really come to City's aid much today. Just shows how much of an upgrade we've got in Vicario this season from Hugo Lloris, God rest his soul. Don't know where he is at the moment, just training, I think. Anyway, I want to talk about Deki Kulusevski now. He also this season has been getting some abuse from, what I would call the kind of Spurs Twitter fan base, saying he doesn't get enough goals and assists. That will come, and I think he is brilliant in that number 10 role. I know he was moved out to the right in the second half, but he was amazing in both roles. What a player we got on our hands for the price that we got him at and how young he is. Unbelievable talent. Him playing in that number 10 role, I think makes defenders less sure which way he's going to go and what he can do. He's so strong on the ball, and he knows exactly when to use the ball, like running with it, and when to lay it off and give a 1-2. Such a talent. Very, very exciting to see him and Lo Celso together. I think the reason why it happened, kind of worked better in the second half when Pierre came on, is because that meant that, whereas in the first half, because of Kulusevski and Lo Celso playing together, neither of them were really tracking back that brilliantly, and Man City had so much space when they transitioned the ball. In the second half, having Pierre there and that being a little bit more of a consistent number 6, that really helped us. But I'll go more into his performance as well. I want to talk about Gio Celso now as well. What a brilliant goal that was. I have to say, not taking anything away from the goal, but terrible defending to kind of show him onto his left foot and give him such a great chance from just like 19 yards. But what a finish, and I thought he was outstanding. I've already watched a couple of kind of compilation clips on Twitter of all his play in today's game, and if you haven't already, I can recommend it. He's magnificent. He's so good in small spaces. We're just playing him how his game naturally fits. Under those previous managers, he was not the right fit, I guess, except for those kind of first 6 months under Pochettino, when he was still getting used to the pace of the Premier League. The problem with Lo Celso is, can he stay fit? If he can stay fit, I don't see why he can't push to be in that starting 11, even when Maddison comes back, even when Bentancur comes back. We can have such a great list of midfield options when those players are back fit. And I think Lo Celso is proving himself. We need this now to be a consistent run of games, though. Not just 2 games, not just 5 games. We're talking about 20 games in the Premier League. Scoring goals as he is now, assisting goals, and showing for the ball the whole time, which is what he does magnificently. It's no surprise to me that Messi loves him in the Argentinian team with him, because he's so great in small spaces. He's always keen to get the ball. Absolute player. It's so good to see him playing his best, and that's down to Ange Postecoglou. He's seen that he's the talent. He's seen that he will fit his style of play. And as a result, we are seeing the best of him finally. Mentioned Pierre-Emile Højbjerg earlier and how important it was that he came in and played that 6 in the second half. I think he'll start against West Ham now. I think he has to. I think it'll be Pierre-Emile Højbjerg. I think it'll be Giovanni Lo Celso. And then it'll be Decky Kulusevski. Or maybe not. Maybe Kulusevski will go out wide left again and it'll be Basuma, Lo Celso and Højbjerg, and Højbjerg playing in that 6. In fact, I would guess that's exactly how it'll be. So that to me is an exciting midfield to play against West Ham, and should have too much for them, even though they've got talents like Paqueta. Should mention, of course, we were a bit lucky going into half-time to only be 2-1 down. They hit the bar and the post a couple of times, and they outplayed us and made loads of chances. But I also want to say we made loads of chances against Aston Villa and against Chelsea in the first half. It's small margins, and today we deserved a bit of luck, and we got some of that luck. I want to mention Brennan Johnson. I think he had a good game going forward, but I would say sometimes he did leave Pedro Porro completely alone tracking back against Jeremy Doku, specifically when he was on the pitch. And obviously Johnson, he has to make those forward runs, and that's what Ange wants him to do, and that's where he's at his most dangerous. But also, we did look lacking, especially in that first half, with Doku kind of running one-on-one against Pedro Porro. Porro did really well, I have to say. I think there's a stat that Doku had his least kind of dribbles past a player of the season with only 1 today, so well done Pedro Porro. But Brennan Johnson has to also be slightly more aware of his need to track back. Not very Ange of me to say that, I realise that. I should say in the last kind of 5-10 minutes of the game, I was very worried when Ange took Lo Celso off. Lo Celso obviously not fully up to match fitness, but we took Lo Celso off against Villa, and I think that we suffered as a result of that. We weren't able to kind of push on and try and get an equaliser in that game as well as we might have done if he was on the pitch, because he's so creative for us. And I did worry when he brought Ollie Skip on for him, but I thought Skip did quite well, worked hard, and in the end obviously we got that equaliser. What a finish from Decky Kulusevski with his head, a very rare one, or some might say it was actually with his shoulder. I mentioned the West Ham game. Christian Romero is back, of course, so that's very exciting. I think he will stick with Ben Davies alongside Christian Romero. I do think Davies was at fault for their first goal today. For the second goal today, where you really saw why he's not a centre-back in a 4, because he wasn't able to keep that line. He dropped, and that allowed them to get through the pass from Doku and then the pass back for Foden's finish. But I think he'll stick with Davies on the left and Romero on the right because of the balance, and Emerson Royal will drop out. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Over and above everything else, guys, What an absolute surprise it was to get that draw there. I think we were outstanding. It was so good to see us really take it to Manchester City, be brave on the ball. Yes, in the first half we lost the ball in some difficult areas very often, but that's always going to happen in these games. We're talking about one of the best pressing sides in the world. We're talking about the team who won the treble last season. Of course they're going to win the ball up high, but our players kept being brave. We kept going for it. And one last thing, a lot of people are going to be annoyed at Bissouma talking about how he didn't have a great game, and he obviously gave the ball away for their third, but Big Ange wants him to be taking risks in those positions. If he'd got the ball through his legs as he tried, incredibly brave, I realise, but we would have been through and on a proper transition for a chance. And I think Big Ange, he's telling him, I take responsibility for that stuff, and therefore, long may it continue. I don't get on Bissouma's back. He is an important and a massive player for us, and he's great, and I think he will start against West Ham. Guys, let me know what you thought in the comments below. As I said at the start, please do subscribe and follow on the podcast platforms if you're not already, be that Spotify or Apple Podcasts. And if not, if you're already listening on those, please come over to YouTube, youtube.com/@BarnabySlater_ for the daily Spurred On podcast. What a result. Come on, you Spurs.